It all started a long time ago when my daughter was about 8 years old. It was one of those aha moments that would change my life forever. I remember distinctly standing in the kitchen when my daughter came home from school one day and said, Mom, guess what? Our school's going to have a canned food drive, and the class that brings in the most canned goods is going to have a pizza party. So what can I bring? What can I bring? I could see this meant a lot to her. She was so enthusiastic. I thought about it for a minute, and I told her, I don't have enough food to share with others. You see, being a single parent, I just couldn't see how I had food to share. I felt like I barely had enough food to put on my own table. I could see the disappointment in her face. She came back a few days later and asked again, and I told her no again. On Friday, the last day of the canned food drive, she said, Mom, can I at least bring one can? So I thought about it for a minute and decided to look in the back of my kitchen cupboard. I found a can of bamboo shoots. I gave it to her, and she was thrilled. And she had something to take to the canned food drive. A few days later, the results of the canned food drive came in, and guess what? Her class won by one can. It was in that moment that I realized that one can make a difference and that I can make a difference. Fast forward a few years later, I was in a leadership training program, and one of our presenters was a woman named Patty Hart. She started to talk about some of the struggles that she was having in the city of Hayward, where I was living at the time. She shared how she had talked to Mother Teresa about the problems she was having, and Mother Teresa said, first, you must feed the people. So Patty Hart decided that she would actually move her recovery center so that she could have a soup kitchen in that part of Hayward. When I heard her story, I knew I wanted to know more about Patty Hart and her leadership style and her strength and her courage, and that one day I would visit her recovery center and see the soup kitchen. It was during my visit to the recovery center that I experienced another aha moment. My husband and I had walked in to the recovery center and saw these little children standing there at the soup kitchen. And looking into the eyes of hungry children just changed my life forever. You see, I wasn't in a foreign country. I was in my hometown of Hayward, California. I asked Patty, well, what are these kids doing here? And she said, they're hungry, and they know they can come here and get something to eat. It was summertime, school's not in session. These kids get their meals at school. And when school's not in session, she said, a lot of these kids just don't eat. I remember standing there in the middle of the room thinking, somebody's got to do something about this. Little did I know that I would be that person. At the time, I was teaching early childhood education at a community college, and I went to my students and I said, you're not going to read about this in your textbook, but let me tell you what I saw. My students were so taken by the story of children standing in line in a soup kitchen in a recovery center that they said, what can we do? And I said, well, what do you want to do? And of course, I had to tell them the one canned story, right? So they decided that they would have a campus-wide canned food drive. They would also collect children's clothing and children's books. They decided they wanted to gift wrap those things and take them to the schools that were closest to that recovery center. They did an amazing job of getting the boxes ready with big red bows on them, just in time for the winter break. When I visited the principals of those two schools and told them what my college students were doing, the principals were filled with tears. When I asked the principals, well, what happens to these kids who eat their meals at school when school's not in session? They replied, we don't know. We just pray. We distributed the boxes at the schools, and I felt like there was a certain kind of magic that occurred for my students, for the kids and their parents who were receiving the gifts. I saw tears in the mom's eyes and joy for the children, and I could see that this made a difference even to my students. I could see that the whole community had come together to help solve the problem of childhood hunger. I knew this experience had brought a special feeling for everyone. I decided I wanted to keep this feeling going and that I would design a program that would help address the issue of childhood hunger in my own backyard. I wanted a program that would be more than just a food program. I wanted an educational component to the program for kids and their parents. I wanted to design a program so that kids had to come there with their parents. I wanted the program to be more than just a pancake on a plate. I approached my school district with the idea of using the school when school was not in session. My proposal to them was turned down. And I resubmitted my proposal to address their concerns, and my proposal was turned down a second time. By then, I went back to my friend Patty Hart, and she directed me to the Salvation Army. And within 5 minutes, it was a done deal. Salvation Army said, not to worry, I could use their kitchen, I could add a rider to their insurance. They would add the rider to their insurance company, and we'd have coverage, and they would assist in any way. So in 1992, the grassroots effort of the Kids Breakfast Club was born. That winter break, we served over 200 breakfasts to kids and their families. A few years later, the Kids Breakfast Club became a nonprofit organization. I was nominated by my congressman as a community hero and ran with the Olympic torch in 1996. On our 10th anniversary, the Kids Breakfast Club received acknowledgement in the U.S. Congressional Record as making an outstanding contribution to children and their families. In 2018, because of the continued leadership in Hayward, the Kids Breakfast Club was selected as one of the top 100 nonprofit organizations in the state of California. Today, 27 years later after I started the Kids Breakfast Club, we have partnered with other organizations in the community and served over 1 million meals to kids and families. And to think, it all got started with a can of bamboo shoots. So how big is this issue of childhood hunger? In 2016, the World Hunger Project stated that 51 million children around the world suffer from childhood hunger. Here in the United States, that means 1 in 6 children and 1 in 5 here in the state of California. So what are the ramifications of childhood hunger and poverty? Research shows a direct correlation between childhood stress and trauma and the effects that it has on the cognitive, physical, and social emotional development of our children. In the 1990s, Kaiser Hospital, along with the Centers for Disease Control, conducted a study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, also known as the ACE study. This study showed that adults who had experienced 4 or more factors during childhood, factors like food insecurity, parental divorce or separation, witnessing domestic violence, having been abused, having a parent be incarcerated, these adults were twice as likely to develop heart disease and immune disease, and 12 times more likely to be suicidal. We know that children who have experienced 4 or more of these factors will have learning difficulties in school and behavior problems in school. So how common is it for children to have these experiences? Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, our Surgeon General for the state of California, said, "The scope of the issue is huge. It's a public health crisis largely unrecognized." So what is the answer? First, being aware of some of the situations that might be happening in your own backyard. Find organizations that are already working to solve some of these issues and perhaps volunteer in helping in some way. I ask you, have you ever thought about how you can make a difference in someone's life? Have you had a dream of helping others, but just to know where to go or how to get started? Remember the story of the can of bamboo shoots. Do you have a can of bamboo shoots in your cupboard? So if one can make a difference, I can make a difference, and you can make a difference too.